The deep space mining station Helios hung silent against the backdrop of the Carina Nebula, its titanium alloy hull reflecting the soft purple glow of distant stars. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck, her dark eyes fixed on the unusual energy readings that had been plaguing their sensors for the past week. As the station's lead xenobiologist, she had seen her share of space anomalies, but something about these patterns made her skin crawl. "Dr. Chen, you need to see this." Marcus Rivera's voice crackled through the comm system. The young physicist's usual calm demeanor was noticeably shaken. Sarah hurried to the sensor lab, her footsteps echoing through the station's corridors. The moment she entered, she knew something was wrong. The holographic display showed a massive object emerging from fold space, a ship unlike anything in human records. Its hull was biomechanical, looking more like a predatory creature than a vessel. Iridescent scales covered its surface, each one larger than a shuttlecraft. As Sarah watched, more ships appeared, forming a hunting pattern she recognized from her studies of Earth's apex predators. "They're launching something," Marcus announced, his fingers flying over the controls. Dozens of smaller craft detached from the larger vessels, their movement precise and coordinated like a pack of wolves. Sarah's mind raced through evolutionary patterns she had studied. They're displaying classic predator behavior. The smaller craft are hurting us. Before she could elaborate, the station's AI blared to life. "Unknown energy signature detected. All personnel to emergency stations." The first blast hit before anyone could react. The station's shields held, but the impact sent tremors through the structure. Sarah grabbed the console to steady herself as Marcus pulled up the damage report. "That wasn't a standard weapon," he said, his voice tight. "It's some kind of biological plasma. It's eating through our outer shields." Sarah watched in horror as the mysterious ships executed their attack with ruthless efficiency. Each move was calculated, designed to disable rather than destroy. These weren't mindless aggressors. They were hunters, and humanity had just become their prey. Emergency broadcasts began flooding in from across the sector. The Helios wasn't the only target. Colonies and outposts across 3 systems reported similar attacks. The unknown species, dubbed the Vex by terrified survivors, struck with surgical precision, testing humanity's defenses and analyzing their responses. In the chaos that followed, Sarah noticed something crucial. The Vex weren't just attacking. They were learning. Each assault was slightly different, adapted based on human countermeasures. But in their methodical approach, she saw something else, a rigid adherence to successful hunting patterns. As the station's emergency pods launched into space, carrying survivors to the relative safety of the nearby colony world, Sarah transmitted her observations to Earth Command. The Vex might be apex predators, but humanity had spent its entire evolutionary history being hunted. They had learned to survive by understanding predators, by thinking differently, by turning weaknesses into strengths. The Helios shuddered again as another blast tore through its weakening defenses. Sarah secured the final data transmission and headed for the last escape pod. As she strapped herself in, she couldn't help but smile grimly. The Vex had no idea what they were dealing with. Humanity hadn't climbed to the top of Earth's food chain by being the strongest or fastest. They had done it by being the smartest, the most adaptable, and above all, the most unpredictable. The escape pod launched into space, and Sarah watched through the viewport as the Helios, her home for the past 5 years, was torn apart by the Vex warships. But even as humanity's first encounter with the alien predators ended in apparent defeat, she knew this was just the beginning. The Vex might be perfect hunters, but humans had spent millions of years learning to survive against perfect hunters. As her pod entered stealth mode and began its journey to the colony, Sarah began documenting everything she had observed about the Vex. Their coordinated hunting patterns, their biological weapons, their methodical approach, all of it would be crucial in humanity's fight for survival. Because while the Vex might be apex predators, they were about to learn that sometimes The prey fights back. The holographic war room of Earth Defense Command buzzed with activity as Admiral James Cooper studied the three-dimensional display of Vex attack patterns. 6 months had passed since first contact, and humanity had learned much about their new adversaries, mostly through bitter experience. Dr. Sarah Chen stood beside him, her presence requested after her groundbreaking analysis of Vex behavior. The dark circles under her eyes spoke of countless sleepless nights spent studying the enemy, but her voice remained sharp and clear. They're not just predators, Admiral. They're specialized pack hunters who evolved to pursue spacefaring prey. She manipulated the hologram, highlighting the complex formations the Vex ships maintained. Every attack follows the same basic principles we see in wolf packs or killer whale pods, just scaled up to three-dimensional space warfare. Cooper nodded grimly. The Vex had already claimed 12 colonies, each attack more refined than the last. But they hadn't encountered anything like humans before. While other species tried to outrun or outfight the Vex, humanity was doing something unprecedented. They were studying the hunters. "Show me the Arcturus defense again," Cooper requested. The hologram shifted to display humanity's first successful repulsion of a Vex attack. Sarah had been there, implementing her theories about predator psychology. The simulation played out. Vex ships approaching in their standard hunting formation, expecting their prey to either flee or mount a conventional defense. Instead, they encountered something that defied their evolutionary programming. Prey that acted like predators. "We succeeded because we broke their patterns," Sarah explained, highlighting key moments in the battle. The Vex expect prey to behave like prey. When our ships scattered in seemingly random directions, then suddenly turned to attack their flanks, it disrupted their entire hunting strategy. Lieutenant Maya Patel, the youngest tactical officer ever promoted to EDC headquarters, stepped forward. "But they're learning. Each engagement shows signs of adaptation. They're studying us as much as we're studying them." Sarah smiled. "That's exactly what we want. The Vex are perfect predators, and that's their weakness. They rely on proven hunting strategies refined over millions of years. But humans," she paused, bringing up images of Earth's evolutionary history. "We were prey animals who became predators by breaking all the rules. We didn't outrun lions. We outsmarted them. We didn't outfight wolves. We domesticated them." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their weapons. It was their ability to adapt, to think differently, to turn their weaknesses into advantages. "We've detected a new Vex fleet approaching the Sigma Draconis colony," Maya reported, her fingers dancing over the tactical display. "But this time, we're ready for them." Cooper studied the defense plan they'd developed. It went against every conventional military strategy. But that was exactly the point. The Vex had never encountered a species that thought like humans, a species that had spent its entire history learning to survive against superior predators. "Implementation of Project Mirror is at 90%, Maya continued. "The quantum decoys are in position, and the colony's orbital platforms have been reconfigured according to Dr. Chen's specifications." Sarah watched as the tactical display showed their preparations. The plan was audacious, maybe even crazy, but it played to humanity's strengths. They weren't trying to beat the Vex at their own game. They were changing the rules entirely. "The Vex think they're the galaxy's perfect hunters," Cooper said, his voice firm with conviction. "But they've never dealt with prey that spent millions of years learning to think like them. Humanity didn't become Earth's dominant species by being the strongest. We did it by being the most innovative, the most adaptable, and above all, the most unpredictable." As the war room buzzed with final preparations, Sarah reflected on how far they'd come since that first devastating encounter at the Helios station. The Vex were still fearsome predators, but humanity was no longer helpless prey. They were something the galaxy had never seen before, prey that had learned to hunt the hunters. The alert system chimed, signaling the approaching Vex fleet. But this time, there was no panic, no desperate scramble for survival. This time, humanity was ready to show the galaxy's apex predators why Earth's history had prepared them for this moment. The hunters were about to become the hunted. The bridge of the UES Chimera hummed with controlled tension as Captain Maya Patel watched the Vex fleet through the quantum imaging array. After months of preparation, Operation Switchblade was about to begin. The plan was either brilliant or insane, possibly both. "All ships report ready, Captain," Commander Rodriguez announced from his tactical station. "Quantum decoys are primed and synchronized." Maya nodded, her mind racing through the countless simulations they'd run. The Vex had never lost a hunting ground in their recorded history, but they'd never faced a species that turned their own predatory nature against them. Dr. Chen's analysis confirms it, Rodriguez continued. The Vex always commit fully to a hunting pattern once they initiate it. They literally can't help themselves. It's hardwired into their biology. The plan relied on this fundamental aspect of Vex psychology. They were perfect predators, but that perfection came with rigid behavioral constraints. Humanity's strategy wasn't to overpower them, but to use their own hunting instincts against them. "Launch the first wave of decoys," Maya ordered. The Chimera's quantum projectors sprang to life, creating perfect holographic duplicates of civilian transport ships, appearing to flee in panic from the Vex fleet. The response was immediate. The Vex ships split into their characteristic hunting formation, spreading out to herd their seemingly helpless prey. Maya watched with grim satisfaction as the alien predators followed their instincts perfectly. "They're committing to the chase pattern," Rodriguez reported. "All ships showing classic pursuit behaviors." Maya keyed her command channel. "All vessels, execute Phase 2. Across the battlefield, human ships emerged from their hiding places in the asteroid field. But instead of attacking directly, they launched thousands of smaller quantum decoys, each programmed with a different flight pattern. The space around the Vex fleet suddenly filled with conflicting sensor readings and impossible trajectories. The Vex response was fascinating to watch. Their rigid hunting protocols tried to track every target simultaneously, their ships turning and twisting as contradictory impulses fought for control. It was like watching a predator trying to chase an entire flock of birds at once. "Their neural networks are showing signs of overload," the science officer reported. "The conflicting inputs are disrupting their ability to coordinate." This was the key insight that Dr. Chen had provided. The Vex weren't just guided by instinct, they were slaves to it. Their neural networks couldn't ignore a potential prey signal, even when logic dictated it was a trap. "Launch the switchblades," Maya commanded. From the belly of each human ship, swarms of autonomous drones emerged. Unlike the decoys, these were very real and very deadly. They darted between the confused Vex vessels, targeting the biological components of their hybrid ships with precise plasma bursts. The Vex tried to respond, but their formations had been shattered. Individual ships spun and fired at phantom targets, while the real threat slipped past their defenses. It was like watching a pack of wolves trying to chase scattered leaves in a windstorm, while hunters picked them off one by one. "Their flagship is attempting to coordinate a response," Rodriguez reported, "but the quantum noise is preventing them from establishing coherent command links." Maya allowed herself a small smile. The Vex were experiencing something they'd never encountered before, the feeling of being hunted. Their perfectly evolved hunting strategies had become a weakness, their inability to ignore prey signals turning their strength into a fatal flaw. Multiple Vex vessels showing critical damage to their biological systems, the tactical officer announced. "Their formation is collapsing." The battle space had become a chaos of light and shadow as quantum decoys continued to multiply and swarm around the Vex fleet. The alien ships fired desperately at targets that didn't exist, while real threats struck from unexpected angles. "They're trying to retreat," Rodriguez said with amazement in his voice. "This is unprecedented. The Vex never abandon a hunt." But retreat wasn't part of the plan. Maya keyed her command channel again. "All ships, execute Phase 3. Let's show them what it feels like to be trapped prey. The human fleet moved in perfect coordination, their positions calculated to trigger the Vex's predatory responses in conflicting ways. Caught between their instinct to chase and their instinct to flee, the alien ships began to break formation entirely. Their neural networks are cascading into failure, the science officer reported. The biological components of their ships are showing signs of systemic shock. Maya watched as the mighty Vex fleet, terror of countless civilizations, began to tear itself apart. Operation Switchblade had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their weapons. It was their understanding of what it meant to be prey, and how to turn that knowledge against the hunters. 3 months after Operation Switchblade, Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the sensor readings with growing concern. The Vex were changing. The biological components of their ships were showing signs of rapid mutation, adapting in ways that defied conventional evolution. They're rewriting their own neural architecture, she explained to Admiral Cooper in the war room. They're trying to overcome their instinctive responses to our deception tactics. The holographic display showed the latest battle footage. The Vex ships moved differently now, their formations less rigid, their responses more measured. They were learning, evolving, forcing themselves to ignore some prey signals that they now recognized as deceptions. How long until they'd fully adapt? Cooper asked, his face grim. They can't, Sarah replied, highlighting specific biological markers in the data. Their entire civilization is built around being perfect predators. They can suppress their hunting instincts temporarily, but it's literally killing them. Every adaptation they make causes massive strain on their biological systems. Lieutenant Commander Kira Jong, who had replaced Maya Patel after her promotion, stepped forward. We're seeing increased aggression in their attacks. They're becoming desperate. The tactical display shifted to show the latest Vex assault on the Proxima colony. Gone was their surgical precision, replaced by almost berserker fury. They were still lethal, but now they were also unpredictable. They're experiencing evolutionary pressure like never before, Sarah explained. We're forcing them to choose between their instincts and survival, and it's driving them to extremes. The warning klaxon cut through the room. John's hands flew over the controls as new sensor data poured in. Massive Vex fleet detected approaching the Sol system. This is different. Their ships are changing as they travel. The display showed the approaching armada. The Vex vessels were undergoing visible transformations, their biological components pulsing and shifting. Some ships merged together, forming larger, more monstrous configurations. Others split apart into swarms of smaller, more agile craft. They're not just adapting their tactics, Sarah breathed, watching the transformations with horrified fascination. They're forcing their own evolution, pushing it to the breaking point. This is their final gambit. Cooper straightened, his decision already made. Then we'll give them a fight they'll never forget. All ships, battle stations. This ends today. The largest space battle in human history began in the outer reaches of the Sol system. The Vex attacked with desperate fury, their ships morphing and changing mid-battle as they tried to find forms that could counter human tactics. Human ships darted through the chaos, their quantum decoys now mixed with real vessels in patterns so complex that even the humans themselves sometimes couldn't tell which was which. The Vex's attempts to ignore deception signals left them vulnerable to real attacks, while their attempts to attack everything left them exposed to precision strikes. Their biological systems are reaching critical stress levels, Sarah reported, monitoring the data from the command center. The forced mutations are tearing them apart from the inside. The battle reached its crescendo as a massive Vex mothership, formed from the fusion of dozens of smaller vessels, charged the human defense line. Its surface rippled with cancerous mutations as it tried to become something that could finally defeat the prey that had turned predator. All ships, execute Maneuver Delta, Cooper ordered. The human fleet scattered in seemingly random directions, but each movement was precisely calculated to trigger specific responses in the Vex neural networks. The mothership's biological components began to fail as conflicting impulses tore through its systems. Unable to ignore the prey signals, yet unable to chase them all, the mighty vessel started to break apart under the strain of its own evolutionary desperation. "They're receiving some kind of signal," Zhang announced suddenly. "It's coming from deep space, beyond our sensor range." Sarah's instruments picked up the biological signatures of the signal. "It's a retreat order, but it's more than that. It's an acknowledgement of defeat. They're accepting their own limitations." The Vex fleet began to withdraw, their ships still morphing and shifting, but now returning to their original configurations. They had pushed their evolution to its absolute limit and discovered that some adaptations came at too high a price. As the alien armada retreated into fold space, Sarah understood what they had witnessed. The Vex had tried to overcome millions of years of evolution in a matter of months, and in doing so, had nearly destroyed themselves. They had learned what humanity had known all along, that true survival meant understanding and accepting your nature, not fighting against it. The Sol system was quiet once more, but the battle had changed more than just the course of the war. It had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their ability to become better predators, but their ability to understand both predator and prey. They had defeated the galaxy's perfect hunters not by becoming like them, but by remaining uniquely human. 1 year after the Battle of Sol, Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the Galactic Council, her voice steady as she presented humanity's findings about the Vex. The chamber was filled with representatives from 100 species, many of them former prey of the galaxy's most feared predators. The Vex weren't defeated by superior firepower or advanced technology, she explained, gesturing to the holographic display showing the biological makeup of a Vex ship. They were defeated by their own perfection. The display shifted to show the evolutionary history of humanity. For millions of years, humans were prey animals. We survived not by being the strongest or fastest, but by understanding our predators better than they understood themselves. When we encountered the Vex, we didn't just face them as enemies. We studied them as biologists, as psychologists, as fellow products of evolution. Admiral Cooper, standing beside her, activated the next sequence of images. They showed the devastating effects of the Vex's attempted forced evolution. Ships torn apart by biological stress, neural networks collapsed under impossible demands. The Vex evolved to be perfect predators, Sarah continued. But perfection comes at a cost. They lost the ability to adapt quickly, to think beyond their hunting patterns. When we exploited this, they tried to force themselves to change, to evolve in months what should have taken millions of years. The council chamber erupted in murmurs as the display showed the first official communication received from the Vex since their retreat. Their message was simple but profound. They requested peaceful contact with humanity. They recognize in us something they've never encountered before, Sarah explained. A species that understands both predator and prey, because we've been both. We don't just fight or flee. We observe, we learn, we adapt. The Vex representatives entered the chamber, their biomechanical forms more streamlined now, less overtly predatory. They had survived their brush with self-destruction and emerged changed, not by forced evolution, but by choice. The Vex speaker, a creature of sinuous grace, addressed the council in its translated voice. We have hunted across the galaxy for millennia, believing that perfection in predation was the height of evolution. Humanity showed us our error. True perfection lies not in being unchanging, but in knowing when to change and when to remain true to one's nature. Admiral Cooper stepped forward. The treaty we propose today isn't just about peace between humans and Vex. It's about a new understanding of survival. The galaxy doesn't need perfect predators or perfect prey. It needs balance, adaptation, and understanding. Sarah watched as the Vex speaker approached the human delegation. Its movements were still those of a predator, but now there was something else there. Curiosity, respect, even a kind of wisdom that came from surviving near extinction. Our species fought to prove which adaptation was superior, the speaker proclaimed. But humanity showed us that the greatest adaptation of all is the ability to understand other adaptations. They defeated us not by becoming better predators, but by understanding predators better than we understood ourselves. The treaty was signed that day, marking not just the end of a war, but the beginning of a new chapter in galactic evolution. The Vex would remain predators. It was their nature, after all, but they would be tempered by the wisdom gained from their defeat. They would learn from humanity the value of understanding over domination. As Sarah prepared to return to Earth, she reflected on the long journey from that first terrifying encounter at the Helios station. Humanity had faced the galaxy's perfect predators and emerged victorious, not through force alone, but through their unique perspective as creatures who had evolved from prey to predator to something more, beings who could understand and bridge both worlds. The stars seemed brighter as the Earth ship began its journey home. In the end, humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy wasn't their technology or their military might, but their ability to show that true strength comes not from being the perfect predator or the perfect prey, but from understanding that every creature, every species, has something to teach about survival, adaptation, and the endless dance of evolution.